Hi there, Fatima. My name's Andrew and I work here at IELTSpodcast.com with Ben and the others. Thanks for submitting your trial correction. These task ones are, what's most important about these task ones is accurately describing the data in an objective fashion. So we must never add information from our own brain, and we must never give any opinion or derive any conclusions, really. We're just looking to summarize the graph, and the goal should be really to allow the examiner to picture the graph in their mind without having to look at it. This requires us to generally introduce the graph first and make sure that the person reading is aware of all of the functions of the graph, and then delving into it with gradually increasing detail and a discussion of trends if that's appropriate. Now, these single corrections are great for offering some guidance on producing good academic writing, but if you would like to make significant improvements to your writing ability, it usually takes repeated corrections over time. Only in this way can you learn to spot your own mistakes and make them less in future. But for now, let's read through sentence by sentence and see what we can do for you. So the bar chart provided displays pet ownership data in 6 different countries, I would say over an 8-year period, from 1990 to 1998. Good. According to the graph, the majority of, it's always better to say the majority instead of most. Most is a little bit informal. The majority of countries showed slight variations over the period, except for America, whose numbers fluctuated drastically. In 1992 and 1994, America recorded its highest numbers with 200,000 people owning a pet. This should be a comma, by the way. In order to denote thousands, we use a comma, not a full stop. Turning to the numbers for Ireland, the data demonstrates that here the least number of people owned a pet, whereas Scotland had the highest number of pet owners at 200,000 in almost every year studied. Generally speaking, maybe not this, but generally speaking, the year 1990 registered the lowest number of pet owners at almost 800,000. While the year with the overall highest number of pet owners was 1994, reaching over 900,000 people living with animals. I would say that actually America did fluctuate the most. But I would say I would refer originally to the total number of pet owners, and that it does fluctuate throughout the period. I would say then because while this represents the total number of pet owners, the number of pet owners for each country is actually not where it comes up to, but the difference between here and here. So for instance, in Wales, we can go from here to here because this is 0 to, I'd say, 95,000? Just under 100,000 anyway. But then Canada is from just under 100,000 to around about 250,000. So we're saying that Canada then, in this year, has just over 150,000 pet owners. So this is the total number, and each colour represents the share of the total that each country has. So it's very difficult to read the numbers for each country, and so it's not that important to try. What is important is to look at the sizes of the colours throughout the period. So if we look, England and Scotland have a very consistent number of pet owners because the sizes of their colours, the proportion of the total, remains similar throughout. We can see that in America, 1995 shows a very small number of pet owners, as does actually for Wales. The total number of pet owners in 1995 is at its lowest during the period. And this is largely due to the fact that both Wales and America experienced a decline in the number of pet owners. We don't really need to say exactly what the numbers were in this case because they're quite difficult to read, but we can say that the proportion of the total for America and Wales diminished considerably. And in 1997, another low point, we can see that this is because of a reduction in Ireland's numbers as well as America's numbers, whereas Wales actually increased its number of pet owners in 1997. So once again, not necessarily in this case referring to the numbers of pet owners in each year, other than the total, which we can see clearly, but instead talking about the fluctuations, which years experienced high numbers, which years experienced low numbers, and why that is, whose proportion shrank, whose proportion grew, and in which years, who was consistent, and in which years did people experience a dip or a surge in numbers of pet owners. So there's lots of language we can use for this graph when we're reading it in terms of shares of the proportions of the total. Now this is slightly different than many of the other graphs you will see. A lot of the time you will see a separate bar graph or a line graph, and they're much easier to read. Because this one discusses proportions of totals, it requires a slightly different approach. So if you would like to continue receiving these sorts of corrections for a multitude of different tasks, you can subscribe to one of our courses, the link to which is on this very page you are staring at right now. I do hope to be seeing some more of your work coming through soon, Fatima, but until then, have a lovely day and speak soon. Bye bye.